everyone. This is Tony Hager with Potentially Dangerous from IAwrestle. We are, we just got 3A rankings out last week. We got 2A rankings this week. So we're excited. We're the season's here. We're talking to coaches, and it's something seems different in the air where like coaches are on it more than normally as far as getting us information, or there's more resources out there now. I'm not really sure what's happening, but it seems like everyone is wanting to get us information and the right information. So shout out to all the coaches. I really appreciate that. It helps us do our job, and we want everything to be correct, right? As best we can. We got guys and girls that are at different weight classes, mainly the boys with football beefing up, and then they're coming back down for wrestling season. So appreciate everybody trying to give us an idea of where they will be. So if you missed out the rankings, those are at rockfin.com/IWrestle. We'll have 1A rankings coming out next week. And then we get into November, and we've got Grandview Open. We'll have Little Kids Wrestling Tournament at the same venue in Grimes. I will be streaming that as well. Then we will have Iowa State versus Grandview live on IAwrestle. So November is going to be crazy. We're going to do some fun things, too, for the first week of practice, where we're going to try to get into some girls' rooms and some boys' rooms and see those vibes. And this year is going to be crazy for the girls coaches and the girls in general, having their own rooms and stuff for some of them. And that's why we are bringing in Erin Kirtley. She's been on the show before in a completely different situation where we were trying to get the sport sanctioned, what we needed to do, right? And those hurdles and things just really happened quickly last year. And we were all surprised at the IWCOA state tournament when the sport was sanctioned. So lots has changed since then. We do have a lot of information up on our website, but obviously the Girls Union has they have their announcements that they have. That's we just kind of copy and paste and get it out to us. So if you need information, go to their website to help you out. But we got Erin on here to answer any of your questions that you have. You have sent some of them in to me already, so I'll try to get them answered. But if you do have some, drop them in the comment section. So without further ado, Erin, thanks back to the show.
Yeah,
appreciate it.
No, thank you for having me. It's always good.
So what are the vibes like compared to like maybe last time you were on the show, where like we're just trying to get as much information out there as possible, like what you got to do to get you to say that you're going to have a team, right?
Yes.
That's the situation we were in last time.
Yep. No, wow. It's, just probably a little under a year later, right? From when I was here last. It's completely different. The conversation's completely different, which I'm thankful for. But now it's just trying to get everybody geared up for season, get coaches the right information, right now we're getting into body comp assessments and different things like that, getting everybody track wrestling logins. And then, we still have the occasional programs that are, they're trying to figure out co-op sharing, if they're going to do that or not, or, if they're going to have a standalone program, what does that look like? So I think this past month, a lot of schools have been doing some good work to try to get coaches approved and school boards, on the path of like, we're having a program, this is how it's going to look. So it's been a wide range of conversation. Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to dog on the wrestling community, but we are kind of procrastinators. So I don't know if you don't have to throw any under the bus, but I'm speaking for us as wrestlers.
Yeah.
What I am noticing is there's a lot of co-op announcements happening now.
Yeah.
So is that a thing where, wow, they're putting a co-op together, we should too, and everyone's kind of scrambling to get everybody underneath their situation, or is it a process to get that kind of finalized?
It kind of depends on district to district of what their process is. Once they submit things to us, that can go fairly quickly. It's pretty straightforward when it comes to us. But I think a lot of schools were just trying to, I would say, do their due diligence and trying to figure out their numbers and have meetings and figure out what they're working with. And then, I give a lot of props to the ADs and the coaches of even just like, where is going to be the best opportunity for our girls right now? If it's, our neighboring program is that they've got an established program, they've got hired coaches. We've only got a couple girls, maybe they're best suited there, or, so there's that thought process, or there is, we have a couple of girls, but they're really, they're doing a great job of trying to be, some trailblazers and get more people interested. And, we have the resources here to get our program up and going. So it's all over the place. And I don't think that that's necessarily bad. I think a lot of ADs were just trying to gather as much information as they could to make the right decision for their programs. So
is co-op sharing, is it a thing in other sports?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So
Yep.
this isn't something new for ADs.
Nope. No. So what's a little different for this situation in co-op sharing is that, we only have one class. So a lot of times, normally during co-op sharing, when you're working with a sport with multiple classes, you have to consider enrollment. And so essentially, if I'm a host school and I'm taking on, the format as it is right now, if I'm taking on, another school, then I have to take on their enrollment, which could potentially bump you up in classification, which then may deter a school from taking on another school, right? Especially some of our smaller schools, if they don't feel like they can compete in certain classes, they're not as likely to take on different schools. So for their enrollment purposes, but when it's one classification, that makes co-op sharing really easy in terms of you don't have to worry about bumping up and that type of stuff. So people have been more welcoming of that. I think right now we have, as of yesterday or the day before, we had 32 co-op sharing agreements that involved about 92 schools.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's a good chunk, a big school, small schools, all that kind of stuff. So it's that might be 2 programs, and that might be 5 or 6 different districts. It's all just depending on that. So it's been fun to watch those come through and see who's sharing and that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
so.
What ADs are working together? I mean, because that's your world too.
Yeah,
like you kind of.
Oh, I get that.
Yeah, you get that situation.
Yeah, I get that.
So I guess I should also probably, for people that don't know you, I mean, I feel like everyone should know you now. I mean, you go to a lot of these events.
Yeah.
They know I think they know your face, and in the girls wrestling side, they know who you are now, I would say. But for those that are tuning in that don't know you, you just came to the girls union about a year ago, right?
A year ago,
Associate director.
Yep.
And, so how have roles changed? Because when you came in, this wasn't a role.
Correct.
Right. And now it is.
Yeah. So when I came in, it was essentially brought in. I mean, again, my boss is a very intelligent lady, but she knew I had the wrestling background, right? And that's kind of, and the AD background and that kind of stuff. But it was more so, I was brought in with under the umbrella of like emerging sports, because we didn't, you couldn't necessarily call me a wrestling administrator because we didn't have wrestling when I came in. But it was, to really sift through the process and figure out if it was going to be doable or not. But, I'm also our tennis administrator and in charge of our student athlete advisory committee. And, wear some different hats in there, in charge of emerging sports. And that was kind of the title that I was under last year. But there's still some things out there that we're looking at of could they be sanctioned or not. And so that's the process doesn't necessarily stop with me in emerging sports with wrestling, I guess, at that point.
Yeah. So since I feel like I'm circling back here, but I apologize. But like there are lots of questions of everything that you're talking about. But so, one thing that comes to my mind, just talking about how things were a year ago, was you sanction it. Initially, when we were talking to the Boys Association, it was, well, we don't have a process for this.
Right.
When it gets sanctioned, everyone's going to want to get sanctioned.
Yeah.
So has that happened with other sports now for you?
Not necessarily. I think when we were really able to define our sanctioning process a little bit more, there were a lot of, I shouldn't say a lot of programs, but there, the programs that are kind of out there, I think that they're paying attention to the process. And I think that they're, those who are maybe wanting to do that, maybe they're doing some of the legwork on their own at that point. But, we haven't had a whole lot of conversation. Some of those may be more under the emerging sports umbrella, and they're trying to figure out, would we be better served being a sanctioned sport, or are we good where we are, right? Because there's pros and cons with both in terms of us jumping in as a governing body, right? Which the world of wrestling is figuring out a little bit right now too. So. Yeah.
So is that process for the girls? Is it safe to say, or is it assumption to say that, I guess this last year of craziness has helped potentially other sports of coming up with a process?
Yeah, I think I think that they can they could potentially now see a path
Okay.
for if they wanted to move forward with that process. And, we as an organization are familiar with that now too. We've had a couple new hires in the last year and kind of getting everybody on the same page. And a lot of people in our office have been involved with the process. It's not just been me, right? And so, watching how that's worked, and then in our minds, if a sport starts to have some conversation with us, then we can maybe a little more easily see of, hey, would this work or not for them, or what else would we need from them, or hey, this is what it would look like for you all. So are you sure you want to go down this road, type of thing. So that's kind of where we're at. So and some sports, they may not have a lot of that too, that we haven't had a ton of conversation, but there's some emerging sports or some sports out there right now that are not under our governing umbrella that but are big in schools, right? And ADs might look at that and say, hey, we need to maybe look at this process of sanctioning this sport. Right now, we like to think that we can be in a partnership with those type of sports, where we can come to that mutual understanding where we don't have to go in and sanction something that maybe doesn't want to be sanctioned, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So we're not really pushing the envelope on too many things. We're kind of letting them come to us right now.
Gotcha. Okay. So that's good. I mean, because it's probably been a stressful year. I mean, lots of questions and lots of things to figure out because this is completely different. And for girl sports. I mean, we're talking about body compensate, putting that in, putting your body comp in. What does that process look like? And do coaches know how to handle those situations as far as, I mean, there's lots of questions, I guess, but procedures, I'm sure. But so you said 92 schools and 32 co-ops,
so 92 schools are involved with co-op sharing agreements. So then we have a whole other column, a whole other slew of programs that are standalone, right? And so we're looking at right now, it's hard for us to tell right now what the exact count is, because in our system of bound, schools can put in when they are planning to host, planning to have an activity, right? So there's a lot of schools that have put in that I'm going through and I'm like, they're not going to have a program. I already know they're not going to have a program. They're not, they don't have numbers, this and that, but that was kind of showing their willingness to have a program, if that makes sense.
Gotcha.
So really, until we start to get into, the track wrestling side of things, where people start entering rosters and whatnot, where we will have a more defined number, if that makes sense. So that is, but my guesstimate right now is that we're somewhere around 130 programs.
Okay. Is that more or less than what you were thinking? Or
I think that I was gonna be really excited with 100 programs.
Okay.
And some of that too is, some of these, what we're calling programs, they might just have one or two girls, which is fine, right? So I'm very careful to say, to use the word program and not team, because team, I think, implies that you can imagine that there's probably more than 10 or more than 15 or whatnot, X amount on a roster when it comes to wrestling. So when it comes to our programs, they look like all different sizes, but, one of our board members today, just for example, thought that, we thought maybe we were going to have 4 people, not a big wrestling school, but thought we were going to maybe have 4 people, and we're at 12, right? So some of that too is, we also know that those numbers may not stick through the first month of, we know that girls are just trying it out right now. Probably a big population of girls are just kind of testing the waters. So seeing some of that fall off after the first month wouldn't necessarily be surprising as far as just overall participation. But I'm really encouraged with what I'm hearing from the schools. There's not been too many that have been like, we thought we were going to have more. It's more on the, we didn't think we were going to have very many or any at all, and now we have 20, right? It's like that type of stuff. So that's been really fun to hear those.
I mean,
stories.
that's great to hear already, because I'm just on social media, right? So that's really all I see. I'm not on the emails, but I've been seeing a lot of teams posting, girls flyers only, like informational meetings.
Right.
I just saw one in Southeast Polk. Yeah. And Southeast Polk obviously has some high level wrestlers, but they don't have 10, 12 girls on their team. Ankeny, obviously, just some CIML schools or former CIML schools announcing those things. So I mean, I could see it going big pretty quick too. So I mean, just for example, like I moved to Earlham. Okay, so we have one, I believe, one or two girls that competed last year. And we threw an email out to the youth part of things, and there was maybe 6 people that said they want to wrestle. Well, now there's an actual flyer with details, and everyone's like, "Oh, should we go out?" So we're talking like 20 now, 25. So it could just kind of spread like wildfire. And some communities are doing free club wrestling just to get them out to try it. Right. And I think that's what everyone's wanting, people to just try it. And if there's that fall off, we understand, because it is a physical sport and it's demanding. It's different, but so I could see things getting kind of crazy with numbers personally. I feel like numbers are going to be way higher than expected. So with that said, the format for the state tournament, because right now in the past, if you're not familiar with the state tournament, everyone, that was just, you just show up with the girls that you want to have on your team, and they all get to wrestle. Now there's these super regionals, gonna be 4 super regionals, so a qualifier to get in the state tournament, which will bring that number down to the official state tournament. Each bracket will have how many wrestlers in 32. it? 32 brackets. Yeah, okay, so 32 wrestlers.
The 30, it'll be set up in 32 person brackets, right? So whether or not at our 235 weight, will we have 32 in that capacity? I'd like to think so, but you just don't know. But that's going to be the bracket set up at that point.
So there's no scenario where that state tournament, we had a question come in saying, is there any scenario that makes the state tournament bigger than 32? It's just more like the super regionals would be bigger?
Right. So at this point, we feel really comfortable with the 32 person, bracket at that point, because, and just from a time standpoint, of sessions and the flow of it, knowing that we've got the dual team tournament on Saturday right after. And you know what I mean? Like we have some constraints there. So I think we feel pretty good with our projected numbers as far as participation of that's what's going to make sense. It's including enough participation, but also legitimizing it so it's not just an all-comers event, I guess.
Yes.
So, yeah.
And that's what the sport needed at the time, right? And we needed to poke you and everyone else, be like, hey, we've got this many girls for a state tournament. Let's get it going, right?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
No fault of how that process used to be, but it's to the point now where
I think
it has
totally
to be.
made sense where it was before in the whole realm of growing the sport and showcasing the numbers and what that could potentially be. I think it was I think that it was fantastic in how that was done. It's just our process is a qualifier, right?
Yeah. Was that immediate? So I know that you and your team were at the IGHSAU state tournament, checking out the venue, and trying to figure out how you would run it, right? Yeah. Was that like right away, like we're going to have regionals?
Yeah. I knew that we were going to have some sort of a qualifier, right? And just, again, I think just to bring legitimacy to it. So that was a conversation that we had with our exploratory committee on the front end, and then also within our office of just like, this is going to be our process, right? In terms of having a qualifier. That's just what we do for our sports, right? So, that was kind of a no-brainer. It just, and we knew, I think looking at the projections, I think we knew that we would be able to pull that off, right? And I think understanding and just talking to different athletes and coaches, I didn't get anybody lobbying for it to not be that way, I should say.
Good. Yeah, I would assume so too.
Yeah.
And just that would also like solidify like the team trophy too, because now that now it was whatever, so
and we weren't, not. I know that there's a bigger discussion too on doing double entries, dual entries, and into a weight class and stuff, and it's just like that. It was hard for us to imagine that process being fair across the board when we don't even have full teams. What I mean?
Because then that does give a 3A, right? Yeah. I mean, that's why you have 3A, 2A, 1A.
Correct.
So that makes sense.
So it just is like, that I couldn't envision that would help us where we are in the sport right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So with the regionals in boys wrestling, we have host schools.
Right.
Obviously, there's way more than four in Iowa that has sectionals and districts, right? Or just districts now. You don't want to give into specifics of where you guys are going, but we're not talking about having these regionals at Southeast Polk or Independence or anything like that, right?
Yeah, so really kind of like our constraints that we're working with right now, I think it's easier when we start talking about, you know, how we had to come to these decisions, right, is because looking at how we mapped it out, right? So when we go through the sanctioning process and we say this is when, you know, we want to have our season in the winter. Okay, so then we start with our state tournament and work from the state tournament backwards, because it doesn't do me any good to have a start date if my, you know, and have X amount of weeks comparable to boys if I don't have if I can't land where I feel like we need to as far as tournament, like a venue availability and all that kind of stuff, right? So we had to, I think that we were intentional about putting, you know, starting from the end and working backwards, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So, okay, so what do we want our state tournament to look like? And so we started there, and then, okay, so you know, what does it look like the week before that? Okay, so at the time when we're making that decision, there's sectionals that are happening, and so we had to, okay, well, we can't do that weekend, whatnot. So we're going to put our state tournament right before that, right? So we also see that we're sharing officials, we're sharing coaches. So with respect to that, and knowing that, you know, that just might be the format for right now and where schools are, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just, again, where we're at. We needed to be strategic in where we place things. So we thought maybe it would be a good idea for us to finish our postseason before the boys' side really got started into theirs, right? So that was kind of first and foremost where we landed there. And then looking a week ahead of that, knowing that there's a ton of really big tournaments on that Saturday that are already established on the IHSAA side, and respecting that and respecting officials' contracts and that right now. You know, okay, what does Friday look like? Okay, so Friday puts us, you know, a week ahead of where our tournament is. And okay, so schools, that's going to be pretty hard for schools to host a tournament, especially when we don't know how many kids are participating, right? So we, you know, unless there was a scenario where a school could really secure their facility without it interrupting their school day and secure parking and all that kind of stuff, there's just not many sites that are set up to do that. So our first look was to, okay, what are some arenas, who's kind of put in for some state bids that we want to circle back to, you know, what potential collegiate sites are available. That, again, we didn't really want to put the pressure. If we don't even know what to expect, how can we put that on our schools, right? That's hard, right? As ADs, as coaches, not being able to really give them a whole lot of information. Here's our projections, and, you know, that didn't really feel right. Now, again, we're still ironing out some of our, you know, our final site here. We've got our 3 of our 4 super regional sites pretty well locked in, but, you know, so we could see something different for that site. But, you know, that's kind of our thought process, because, again, that's when we had access to our coaches and officials, was that Friday. And again, Thursday night before, they were moving some things around to try to accommodate girls wrestling. So a lot of the conference tournaments then on the boys' side are happening on Thursday night. So we felt like, okay, we got one day to get this done. So I just said, everybody mark your calendar for January 27th, because there will be a massive snowstorm. So.
That's how it will work.
That's how it works.
That's how it works.
So and we do have our snow date, our weather date for that is that next Monday.
Okay.
So we
thought about
again, that from the AD world, right? You just always have
Worst
that backup
case.
plan. Yep.
Because, you know, with I know we're talking with Louie is not everyone wants to host a sectional. Not everyone wants to host a district.
Right.
And not everyone can host.
Correct.
That is usually a topic every year. Oh, we always go here. We always go here. Well, are you willing to host? Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not necessarily a moneymaker every time, you know. So
Well, you got basketball going on
and
at that same time, and there's just a lot of things happening
yeah,
at that time.
and getting people to run your tournament isn't easy always too,
No.
and especially if you're hosting tournaments and
Right.
regional dual sites, whatever
Yeah.
it may be. So lots of logistics have gone down
Yes.
in this. So we're excited to hear about the regional. So it sounds like they'll be at larger venues
Yes.
than a high school gym. So
Yeah.
we look forward to seeing those. Okay, so circling back to just sheer, the participation numbers. We're talking about one class now. So, and is there a magical number of like, well, we got to go to 2?
Right now we're gauging some things. So we've got one class for swimming and diving.
Okay.
And so within that one class, we've got, I think, 1,500, 1,600 participants. Okay. And so that seems to work for swimming and diving. I know that it's kind of this continual conversation of, do we bump up, do we not? But, their sharing agreements are kind of similar in that, not everybody has a pool or access to a pool, right?
Absolutely.
So it kind of is set up for some of the larger schools. A lot of the smaller schools feed into that because they don't have a pool, right? So that, considering the sports are apples and oranges, that's just though a number that we have to compare it. But I told our advisory committee from the get-go, like, be ready to be thinking about how this looks during season, how this looks for our postseason, and being ready to have the conversation of making some moves after year one. So again, it's one of those things that we really encourage co-op sharing. We know a lot of people have been really thoughtful in how they put that together, and getting settled into some of this stuff. So we don't, we're not going to necessarily disrupt the apple cart that we've had people put together this year, unless it's like it's time and we need to, or our projections say, hey, next year it's going to be way crazier. I don't know. So we'll watch the numbers of our initial participation. We'll watch the numbers of how maybe that it might decline or if it increases during the season, all that kind of stuff. So we're definitely data collectors when it comes to that.
Is there, in swimming, is there any kind of pushback of, well, I go to this school, which is a 1A school. I'm swimming against 3A schools, but I practice at the 3A school.
Yeah.
Is there any like, oh, that's not really fair conversations? I'm just having conversations with coaches. And this is not how to, I'm thinking of like what coaches are going to say. Well, we don't have a really nice weight room.
Yeah.
We don't have the resources that at a 4A, technical 5A, some schools have as, a 1A school. Is that something that happens in swimming?
I don't think it necessarily does, because I think it just comes back to that element of, if the school doesn't have a pool or access to a pool, then it's kind of,
they absolutely can't.
You know what I mean? You just can't, right? So that's where, but people have wrestling rooms, right? So that makes it different, right? And they have established boy programs, so that makes it different.
Yeah.
And so it's all kind of about coming back to that facility piece, which is why, again, we can compare the numbers, but it's hard to compare the actual sport when it comes to swimming and diving and then wrestling. So.
Okay. So with that said, as far as being in one class right now, is there talks of like what that process looks like for potential dual teams, the dual state tournament, like, because that comes down to classes too, right?
It does. It does. I'm laughing.
Can 10 schools co-op against it? Like, we got 10 co-op with 10 schools, and this co-op's got 3 schools, but these 3 schools are really good against these 10. Like,
but the funny thing is like Eastern Iowa is doing these things, right? I'm talking to, I'm president of the Athletic Directors Association for our state. So I'm in constant conversation with ADs all the time still, right? But so they know obviously that I'm working on this big project. And so people are sending me stuff all the time of like, hey, just, if you want to stop out or meet, or hey, this is when we're hosting some stuff. This is going to be really cool. Come check this out. So, but I mean, there's dual team tournaments happening in Eastern Iowa already scheduled this year, right? Without us saying, here's a format or here's not. It's kind of us being like, hey, maybe scrambles work and more of the invitational type stuff works if you have just either low numbers or you want to get, you don't feel like the dual, the dual aspect, the dual meet aspect is going to work out for you or your program right now. So we're giving schools the freedom to do that. But like I said, in Eastern Iowa, they're already putting those things together. So it's going to be interesting to kind of watch if they like that more, and how that runs and how that works. But you see a lot of the, I don't want to say, it's like a lot of the indecisiveness or a lot of the scuttle that comes from watching, the boys dual team tournament, right? And again, I think the event itself is great, but there's constant conversation on where to place it and what works best. And, so it's just kind of like, until we really feel the need to push for that, I think we're going to sit back and enjoy the individual tournaments and let the sport grow. Because again, if you put a lot of emphasis on having dual meets and dual team tournaments and dual championships and things like that, then maybe that gets a little harder, or people are, coaches or schools feel like that's the goal. And so maybe then some of those smaller schools or smaller programs don't grow like they could, like when we're rolling out this individual type concept. So, we're paying attention to that as well.
Because I think back from going to some girls' duels, they're a lot of fun to watch.
They're a ton of fun.
Boys are great too, but like
there's a different energy.
Different energy. It's just a different world. And that is where I think the participation can really get boosted up is through that dual atmosphere. And we're seeing it at the youth level now. Randy doesn't have a mic on, but Randy Yeager is our youth. She does all our youth stuff now, and we're just seeing more duels in the youth scene, and it just, kids have a lot more fun. There's a lot less pressure. If they do lose, the next person picks them up, right? So I think that is the key to maybe getting boosting numbers for girls wrestling. So
I think there's going to be, we're already constantly having a conversation in our office about classification and how that works and the process. So I'd like to, really look at that too. And it's not just for the sport of wrestling. We're having the conversation all the time, girls basketball, different things like that, of, the whole, as I explained, the co-op sharing process before and having to take on enrollment and not, is there a different formula that we can use for some of our classifications so that we can make the process maybe feel a little bit more fair to our smaller schools who they want to, they want to give maybe their neighboring schools opportunities to come and compete with them, and without them having to sacrifice going up a class, right, and competing up a class if they're still, a small team made up of small schools, and you know what I mean? Maybe the competition isn't as strong there. So I think that there's some bigger conversations or bigger aspects of the whole process that I think we want to take a look at to make sure that when we make that move, that it's well done and well thought of. If we're not creating more issues for the sport than what we should be at that point.
Okay. I mean, there's just that much more to logistics when you start talking duels.
How
you qualify for duels.
Right. All that. Rankings. I mean, just all those things that we're, we want to naturally get those things in place, right? But again, how much do you potentially, what are the unintended consequences of doing those things when you're also trying to really grow participation and really grow the sport in itself? So we're going to pay attention to all of it for sure.
Okay. So sticking with participation, when it got sanctioned, I interviewed after, because this happened right before finals, right? It was sanctioned. Okay. Yeah. So after the finals, interviewing the girls, like, hey, what are your thoughts on it? Everyone's really excited. Well, there were a few that were like, not really excited about it, because they are super ultra competitive. They want to wrestle the boys. They want to qualify for the boys state tournament. That was like on their bucket list, right?
Yeah.
What are those hurdles that has there been pushback for that from specific, maybe just parents or ADs or even coaches of like, hey, we need these girls on our boys team?
Yeah, I think, when we have framed it as, going down the road of sanctioning, again, has been really interesting. But when we frame it as, hey, what's best for your girl in this sport, right? What's best for your girls, right? Because a lot of coaches, and again, I'm not trying to dog on them, but what, they think about what's best for the team, right? They've always thought about what's best for the team. And those girls have been part of their team. And so they're thinking of it as a whole. But now we have the opportunity to say, okay, what's best for your girl? Is it what's best for your girl wrestling boys? Or is what's best for her to grow in the sport of wrestling on the girl side, right? And so I think when we challenge that thought process a little bit, because we're seeing, the girls that wrestle at a very high level, a lot of injuries, right? When they're wrestling against boys, right? And I'm not saying that they're not competitive, because they absolutely are, right? So I don't want to take anything away from them or make it seem like, we're doing them a huge favor, right? Because I get all of it. But I think more and more, and again, just the whole thought process of the second that we announced sanctioning, right? It's just like my inbox was full immediately of the number of schools that said, now we'll do it. Now we'll do it. Now we'll jump on. Like, we have girls now that want to do it. Or they were saying, hey, as soon as you announce this, as soon as you do this, then our school's on board with it. So it was almost kind of like the reverse of what I was asking for initially in the whole process. But so we knew that there was, we might lose one or two, we might lose a handful, right, of those high competitive girls, or they might try to find a different path, right, in this process. But we knew, that 99% were asking for this, and we're wanting to see that growth. And again, the numbers aren't going to lie this year when, now girls feel comfortable going out and trying it, and they feel like they're set up, not necessarily like the deck's not stacked against them when they go out on the mat, right? Pound for pound, that type of stuff. And so I think that, the handful that maybe had concerns about that, they're still going to have concerns about that, right? And that's fine. I wish them well in whatever they, path that they choose there. But I do hope that they can see some great opportunity and what the Girls Athletic Union can also do for them as far as highlighting them. A lot of the college coaches are really excited about coming to the girls tournament, and they, the college coaches have said, we don't need girls wrestling against boys. We don't that's not how we're going to recruit
evaluate them.
Yeah, that's not an important tool. We want to see them wrestling against girls. And I think just, gosh, how our girls went up and just totally really they put a spotlight on themselves for how they competed up at Fargo, from a team and an individual standpoint. And it's like, girls wrestling is not only growing quickly in terms of participation, but the quality, I think, is really, really is really there. And I don't know, so I get all aspects of it, and that's been those conversations have been a little harder, but I respect everybody in the process, I guess.
So if you are one of those individuals that say, I want to coach is telling me, hey, we need you for the boys team, but they have a girls team. Say there's 10 girls on this team. There's one that's really good. Can they pick that one from, or can that one say, well, I'm not going to compete with the girls team. I'm only the boys.
No. So what we're saying is, if your school has declared that you have a girls team,
okay,
then the girl has to wrestle on that team, right? Okay. So I said, it's like people who understand track wrestling, right? It's like you've got a girl side of track wrestling and a boy side of track wrestling. You've got a girls side that's imported in this roster over here and a boys side that's imported over here. Those can't cross at any point during the season, okay, if that makes sense. Okay.
So when they do their body comp, that's when they
correct.
Okay.
Correct. And that's not necessarily based on the individual, right? That's based on if the school has said we're going to offer a girls team, then it would be the expectation for all girls to wrestle on that team, right? So then it brings up the whole, okay, if our school says they're not going to have a girls team, but now we're going to allow girls to wrestle on a boys team, right? So that's a bigger conversation, and just something that we've had to work through with the IHSAA, because they allow that. And not, I don't want to get too far into the weeds in that conversation, but they have it allowed in their bylaws for things like football, right? And so it's just kind of very general in their bylaws, right? So if there's not a girls team offered, then girls are allowed to compete on the boys' side.
Could a girl doesn't want to play softball, but she wants to be a catcher for the boys, can she?
So there have been situations where that has happened, and some of that is evaluated on a individual level of like, this girl has been playing baseball her entire life. And so when she gets to high school, right, and she wants to compete on a baseball team, we've gone back and looked at board reports and things like that where they've said, baseball is a different sport than softball. So that has been upheld, that a girl who's participated in baseball the whole time can participate in baseball.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So it gets a little hairy, to say the least, but there are certain situations where those things exist and have been upheld. So
I just know wrestling. I know wrestling coaches. And if there's a way to make certain things happen, they'll make a way to make certain things happen.
Right. Right. That's part of the reason why we felt strongly about rolling it out as an individual sport. So we're, that maybe some of those people didn't have an argument then of, well, we don't have enough for a team, so these girls have to continue to wrestle on our boys' team, right? Where we said, one person can equal a program, right? And then they need to find a way at that point. If that girl has the ability and the interest to wrestle against girls, then they have to go from there, right? Then we've been telling ADs then, hey, it's your job to find a path for them. If that's through co-op sharing or having your own program, that's where the consideration lies there.
Because that's been like one thing when the dust settles a little bit of what is there a workaround for these wrestlers that don't want to wrestle against the girls to get in? So that's why I'm just curious if that's if that's set in stone right now, or is it still a working thing?
So what I think what I can fairly speak to in that is if there is a sanctioned girls program within that school, right? If that high school says we are having a girls program, so then the girls in that school have to compete on that girls team, right? Whether again that's 1, 2, 3, whatever that is, and there is no crossover at that point, right? Like once they're on a girls roster, there's no crossing over on that point to say, we want to wrestle individually in individual tournaments as a girl, but maybe dual tournaments, co-ed or something like that. We don't allow those streams to cross, right? So once they've committed to the girls program and that school is committed to the girls program, then they're wrestling girls all the way through, right? So there would not be a situation where, let's say, if a girl is wrestling on a boys team during the season, then in postseason she wants to wrestle, within the girls lane. That's not a possibility.
Because I'm from what this really only came up at Night of Conflict because Bobby, we mixed in boys and girls into the duel. And there's lots of questions that get brought up when we bring the girls and the boys together, and what this could look like for potential duels on a Tuesday night, like mixing the two in a duel where there's a girls team score and a boys team score. Two different, Iowa High School Athletic Association, the girls team. So like,
again, if you're setting up track wrestling, right? Like those people who understand track wrestling. So if I've got my track wrestling computer on this mat and we're wrestling girls from this roster, then girls are wrestling on this mat in a duel, right? They can wrestle in a duel format, and it can be next to the boys. But on that track wrestling computer, they're in the IHSAA format, right? And IHSAA rosters, and they're wrestling on that mat, right? And so it's just there's again a lot of schools, especially in Eastern Iowa, and some in Central Iowa, I think now too, that they're going to have side by side duels, right?
Awesome.
Which is I can't imagine, the a more fun gym atmosphere, right?
Yeah.
When you're in that space, I think that
Double
would
the
be,
spectators.
oh yeah,
roughly.
yeah, totally awesome, right? So I think there's a lot of reasons why schools would want to do that, but there isn't going to be, hey, we're going to combine our rosters at all, or hey, we're going to do this or that. You know, again, like I don't think you have to get so super picky, because we see it all the time with JV or exhibition matches where, hey, you know, this mat's open, so we're gonna go wrestle over here, and like that stuff's fine, right? It's just a matter of girls will not be scoring for boys events, and you know, boys won't be scoring for the girls events, yeah, all that kind of stuff. There's no co-ed combination at this point for dual meets.
Is right now like basketball games? There's a girls game and then there's a boys game?
Uh-huh.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
I thought that's how it was at
Yeah.
high school. I don't follow
So
basketball,
again, there's schools then that are saying, hey, we're going to run a girls duel first or a boys duel first, and then, you know, or even a quad, and then, hey, we're gonna throw this in on the back end either way, right? Okay. So I think that's part of the beauty of this process right now, is that we're giving schools flexibility to kind of build what works for them, as far as, you know, what they want to host, how they envision it, what their facilities will allow, all that kind of stuff. So you could absolutely still have, you know, tournaments going on where, you know, you got boys wrestling over here and girls wrestling over here, and they're in the same space, and that's all good. So there's
my biggest worry of thinking of, like, I'm thinking worst case, right?
Yeah.
Of, you know, coaches get into a say we've got a boys and a girls duel going on. Coach gets in a situation where, ooh, I need Sarah.
Yeah.
Can we pull her over here and take a forfeit or wrestle, you know,
Sarah's
whatever.
not eligible.
Like,
yeah.
I'm concerned that coach might just, like, you're in the moment, put her in, and then so now is that individual ineligible?
Yeah.
For the rest of the season.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, it wouldn't be a whole lot different than, you know, and I haven't come across that too much where that's going to be the concern, because I do think that.
I mean, that would be like a
correct. No, I mean, I get it, right? I get it, because again, we're dealing with the sport of wrestling and some really passionate people. As we've established.
I was thinking, like, in the moment, you're like, like, this is a good idea.
I need somebody, right?
Oh crap!
It's like they don't grab the 106-pound cheerleader off the mat and say, hey, just weigh in quick. You know what I mean? Like, there's such a process to that, right?
Yeah.
Of the whole weigh-in process, the whole, you know, I mean, it just, again, I don't think that we're going to be in those scenarios. Not that obviously hasn't crossed my mind, right? But I think the fact that we are just really doing our best to establish these rosters, and this is who belongs to who at this point, right? And so they're not, that would be a really interesting scenario, right?
Okay, so.
But yeah, we're not encouraging that. Don't do that.
Don't
if you're
do
a
that.
coach and you're listening, don't do that.
Don't do that.
Definitely don't do that.
You know, one thing that, like, just hearing, like, people thinking about this being a scenario, it's kind of annoying. I haven't talked to you about this, so I'm assuming it might be annoying to you too. But, like, you know, we're pushing girls wrestling, and potentially coaches or schools or ADs are fighting it. Like, that doesn't seem like what we were trying to push for, right? Yeah. So, like, I could see how that could have a snowball effect of small schools just saying, you know, we're just going to keep her on our team. You know, I don't hope that doesn't happen, right? So, I'm not trying to plant the seed there, but that's what needs to happen to say this is just the way it is, right? So on that same a completely different scenario, you know, say there's a boy that you know, he says that he's a she, right? Or she says she's a he, right?
Right.
Transgender wrestling,
transgender
right?
Yep.
Is that something that happens in other sports?
So really, and you know,
is that just like with their official?
No, our governor came out, you know, last March, right? Because I remember being at the state basketball tournament, so early March, and said that, you know, there will not be boys competing on girls teams, right? Like you have to essentially compete for your biological sex. And, you know, then it goes further into it essentially of, you know, the discriminated gender and different things like that. So you can get pretty far into the weeds of people who I think when people are very educated on that, they can pick that apart in different ways. But essentially, it was for the notion of making sure that boys were not competing in girls' programs, right? And so, but that it's different though. I think when you're looking in the world, and these are questions we've had to ask too, of like cheerleading, dance, where you have male athletes and female athletes competing with each other, right? And so then those are essentially established as co-ed, right? And so that is a co-ed activity, a co-ed sport, that type of stuff, right?
Yes.
Where those are being allowed.
Gotcha.
So that is, but for our more physical, when I say physical, I mean actually, competing physically against each other, right? With contact, it's been very clear that that boys will not be allowed to participate in that. And so that's been that we haven't had a whole lot of questions on that since the governor made that declaration last March.
I just know that came up with swimming, came up with wrestling down in Texas as well. So
absolutely. Those are things that we were definitely having to think about last year at this time before that was, essentially like within the legislature, right? Yeah. So we were getting a lot of calls on those things, just as they were happening in schools with different sports, or just even then people are able to say, okay, well, hypothetically, if, and so we don't field too much of that anymore. Just on the back end of the governor's.
And that just happened this past
March.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Right. So it was, again, literally, I remember it because it was a topic of conversation at state basketball when we were there. So
yeah, I mean that's because you don't talk about discrimination, like you could say they don't feel comfortable going out for the sport of wrestling in the current situation. Well, now maybe they do.
Right.
The government just came in and said that that's not going to be an option.
Correct.
But I could see how that could be potential. Opening up the doors for them to have those opportunities, but
correct,
that's not an opportunity. So
right,
we can just squash that.
Yeah,
I guess.
Think that
but
for now that conversation has more or less been put to rest for now. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So next question that I got online was, how did the state tournament and the duels come together, of you guys, is it like, hey, we're going to do this. Do you guys want to do the state duels? And because I know that you and Louis do have conversations. You guys were very influential on each other trying to get this going. Everyone knows that Louis, was trying to get it done, right? So you coming in and being have the ability to do it, right? How did those conversations happen? Because that's a huge change. For the boys' side.
They've had a lot of changes too,
I mean, people, like, we were hanging out the other night and everyone forgot that state duels are the first of the month. Mm-hmm. Like that's a deal. So have to plan for state duel or state tournament being 4 days now and not being a dual tournament. So how did that all kind of happen?
Yeah, well, kind of like I was saying earlier, is that Louis and I had a lot of conversation initially, when we were talking about rolling this out and sanctioning it and stuff and how this would look. And first and foremost, we knew we were going to share officials. We knew we were going to have to share some coaches. We knew that there was going to be some transition there. So I think that, we kind of agreed to help each other by staying off of each other's dates on certain things. Right. And so when we were looking to place our state tournament, it was evident at that point where we wanted to be at the Extreme Arena in Coralville. And so working with them on their scheduling, it really at that point, we didn't really have much to work with if we wanted to go a Friday, Saturday tournament. Right. And not saying that we couldn't get there in the future, but we just didn't have the officials to work with. We didn't have the coaches, that type of stuff. I feel like we would have been, splitting a lot of our fan base and some people like that too. So we wanted to make sure first and foremost, we were staying off that sectional state. Okay. So when we, knowing that there was some conversation that, hey, if we move away from sectionals, that could potentially be the dual team tournament date. And, there was, I don't want to say, pros and cons to that, because, people are like, well, just, give the girls their own highlight, give the girls their own time to shine, and without the boys having to jump on it. But I look at it as, gosh, that's 3 days of really great wrestling, all back to back, and sharing some of those same schools and some of those same fan bases. I think it helps probably ticket sales for both of us. Not that that's the end all be all, but to have a full arena on Friday night and have that be fans of girls wrestling, but then maybe some people who haven't been paying a whole lot of attention to girls wrestling from the boys' side, showcasing our best of the best that night in front of them, I think could feel really special. So that's the process. Was we were just ready either way for them to not have sectionals, or for them to have that dual team on that Saturday. So we were good with whatever. We were totally good with being a standalone event on Thursday, Friday if we needed to. So I knew that there was a lot for them to work out in their process with their advisory committee, their board, all that kind of stuff. There's just so much that goes into those decisions that my opinion didn't matter in that, right? What the girls did was completely independent from what the boys did, but it was one of those like, hey, this could potentially work out. We didn't know exactly.
You were doing it no matter what.
We were doing it no matter what, right? And so we felt strongly about planting ourselves there regardless, right? But then when they moved, they said they were doing away with sectionals, because then at that point it still wasn't 100% clear if the Extreme Arena was going to work for that event or not, right? So then there was discussion after that of, where will this be in Des Moines? Will this be somewhere else? Will this be in Coralville? That type of stuff. So I just, Louis has been a great person for me to bend his ear on a lot of things. And so, we were having conversation about those things, but for me, it wasn't, I knew that I didn't have any influence on what they were doing there, and that was their process. And just like he totally respected our process too. So, yeah.
I mean, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. I think it'll be fun.
All parties.
Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense for the coaches too. Like,
right.
There are a lot of
and our officials. Right?
Yeah. Yep. They can all just stay in house all weekend. Maybe get a little bit of a break Friday night, but
right.
So that it makes sense. In regards to officials, we have the IWCOA convention coming up.
Right.
Here in 2 weeks. 2 weeks.
Gosh, yeah, really
and so if you're a coach out there and you haven't got your school involved in that, get that. That's also how you get parking passes for the state wrestling tournament. So make sure you guys support that. There's a lot of good things that those funds do go to that I think a lot of people don't understand. So I just found out I'm emceeing that.
Are you?
Yeah. So I've never done.
That's cool.
Never done it.
That's cool.
So I've got a couple jokes that I'm gonna do because Reimers asked me.
See, we have the Reimers connection, right?
Don't want to fail. So
and that was he and I had some. I was there last year, and he and I had some really good conversation. And I am just this inquisitive person by nature, but it was kind of like, hey, what if do you guys like offer some mini sessions or this or that? Just again, knowing that if we were to sanction it, we would have this whole new crop of coaches, right? Or coaches that went from being volunteers or assistants on the boys' side to then jumping over to the girls' side and saying, hey, we want to do this. And maybe now we have more officials that would want to get into the mix of it. So it's like, this could be this convention could be a really great opportunity. And not that it wasn't done well before. They do a great job, right? But it's like, this could potentially look like more. Mm-hmm. So maybe offer more, right? Like maybe like give them a reason to come, because it's hard for people on a Saturday in October to bust away from a lot of the things that they're doing, right? So I think they really embrace that. They let the girls advisory committee sits on the IWCOA side for the kind of the girls board on that side. So there's they are totally rising to the occasion and having some mini sessions focused on girls wrestling, but then also the boys are jumping in and having some stuff too of just like, hey, this is how you grow a program in general, and this is how you get your community behind it, and then youth programs and different things like that. So there's a lot of really good information that's going to be had for coaches, and officials are embracing the same thing. They're having some different breakout sessions and just going over a lot of different things there. We're bringing in Coach Bono from Wisconsin. He's going to do some technique. And then also Coach Verbeek, who is a newly appointed assistant for the girls at University of Iowa. She's going to be coming in and she's going to be doing some technique because we've heard that she's a great clinician. And so we're excited about that. It is, unfortunately, the University of Iowa's homecoming that day, right? So they've got their game that afternoon. So Coach Chen was on board. She was going to do it initially, but they are having her grand marshal the parade. So that's a big deal.
Yeah.
And so, but she actually said, yeah, Coach Verbeek's probably a better clinician than I am. So you're in good hands there. So we're really excited to offer up, again, just in the spirit of growing the sport of wrestling, some good stuff that, new coaches, veteran coaches, coaches of females, coaches of males, like everybody can get some good stuff out of it. So we're excited about those things.
Yeah, it used to be 2 days. Now it's down to one.
Right.
And so coaches don't feel like they have to come like the whole weekend.
Right.
I was just curious how that was going to work because you need just as many officials as the boys do.
Yeah.
I have been seeing a lot on social media of past girls wrestlers that have graduated, even current.
Yeah.
That are helping officiate every once in a while, like these little tournaments that are happening in preseason. So, is that a concern? Or
we have, just looking at the number of officials who have registered on the girls' side, right? So they register both on the boys and the girls' side, and they do that for basketball. They do that for all sports where it's boys and girls, right? So, they wrestle or they register for that. And then, I think we had like 160 officials register, which is great, just on the girls' side, right? Okay. And a lot of those, the majority of those cross over with the boys as well. And there's still time for people to do that. And so just looking at the sheer number of it and what we've kind of broken down that we need for postseason, I'm not concerned about it necessarily from a postseason standpoint, but definitely during regular season, that's a concern for a lot of our schools. But I do think they're being strategic in where they place things in terms of, we're going to go from the traditional Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday that the boys are doing and going Monday, Friday, right? And doing some different things like that where we can share that same pool of officials for the time being. But no, you're right. There's a great interest, I think, in a lot of growing conversations of how females can continue to contribute to the sport after they graduate, or even if they're somebody who's been passionate about the sport and they don't feel like there's been a place for them before. Now there's avenues, right? And that's going to be definitely more intentional. I have to laugh when we're thinking about the fact that, last year we're like, this is going to be great. Once they graduate, there's going to be like, we're going to grab them and there's going to be these direct paths to coaching and to officiating, which still exists. However, now all of these collegiate programs are popping up, which is great. Yeah. It's great. It's going to give our girls in state, the girls out of state, great opportunities, right? But we didn't necessarily anticipate the boom on the collegiate level, right? And so I'm like, shoot, if you're a girl in Iowa right now and you want to go wrestle on that next level and you're decent or just even middle of the road and wanting to continue that pathway, I think there's going to be a path for them to wrestle collegiately, which again is great.
And get their school paid for.
And get their school paid for, right?
So wrestling.
Exactly. So there's great opportunities there. It just was like, oh man, I kind of wanted those. I kind of wanted that pool. Yeah. But then I have to remind myself, nope, they're going to just continue to grow in their comfort level, their skill, their experience. And so then I'm going to snatch them up after college. So there again, but it's just a lot of consideration there. But yeah, there's definitely past where it can work, when they're in college doing those things, and then we can see how we can, work on your coaching authorization now and, start doing some of these tournaments in the summer and, we can still integrate them. So
I mean, like one of my biggest pet peeves have been the last 4 or 5 years is, and talking with some of the older officials that have been around a lot and talking with the new officials that want to get into officiating. Yeah. The biggest hurdle was, they can't get into any tournaments because you've got a group that you go to. They can't get any of those tournaments. So they're stuck doing like a JV tournament. And no one, everyone's like, I don't want to do a JV tournament. I feel like we're ready. Well, the older officials are saying, you need to have that time on the mat in order to get that. Okay. So what's happening is the younger generation is like, well, screw it, I'm just out. Right. So how do we get them to say, well, I got to put in my time. That concept doesn't happen anymore, really with anything, but in wrestling, you really need it. So right now with the girls coming open, there's tournament opportunities where, you know, you can go work a full day. You don't have to work as a JV duel.
Right.
Where you're only getting, you know, $50 or $100, whatever it may be. You're not making a lot of money to be an official anyways, but, you know, so, you know, there's opportunities there is basically why I brought that up is if you are that official that just feels like, hey, I can't get in the Ed Winger, I can't get into, you know, the Sharp, I can't get in these big tournaments because I'm just brand new.
Yeah.
Hey, like.
Well, yeah, I think that there's kind of been, in talking with, you know, a lot of officials or officials who feel like they're maybe on the fringes or, you know, they're close to breaking in, but they're looking for some of that opportunity. And they're like, you know, how do I really showcase myself or my skills if I'm not, you know, if I'm not officiating those type of high level events, you know, because people want to feel like I can do that before I'm assigned that, but I can't get assigned that until, you know what I mean? It's again, like this catch-22. But I do think where, you know, there's again going to be a lot of opportunities and postseason and all that kind of stuff for them to showcase their skill set and how they handle, you know, high pressure events and different things like that. So, you know, we're excited about that too. You know, I've got a fantastic. So I think I should back up and say, you know, we have just different processes for how we do things at the Girls Union, right? And so one of those things is we hire officials coordinators for all of our like major sports, right? So for softball, for basketball, for volleyball, for soccer, we have officials coordinators that are in place. Okay, so those are people who are responsible for assigning all of our postseason stuff. Okay, so so one of my first tasks was to hire a officials coordinator for girls wrestling.
Okay.
So that is Bruce Ennin out of Iowa City. Great guy.
Awesome.
And so we've had a ton of meetings and stuff. And so he's gotten a few more people on board with kind of forming a committee or a board. And so they're looking at, you know, one of the things that I tasked him with is like, okay, what's our process going to be for postseason selection, right? Because again, in all of our other girls sports where we have officials coordinators, we have an evaluation process, we have all of this stuff, right? And so we really, you know, they were definitely up for the challenge of figuring that piece of it out. And Bob Baxter over in Sioux City has been really great about, you know, he's a NCAA evaluator. And so he had some access to some tools that are, you know, going to be kind of cool. And so, you know, we're going to bring a little bit of that aspect as well to maybe helping out some of those officials too, by giving them some really good feedback. Right. Mm-hmm. And, you know, if you want to work postseason for girls, we want to be able to evaluate you during your season.
I love that.
You know, so
it's not just like a good old boys club.
Yeah.
Like,
it's all
about who
there's
you know,
a process,
right?
There's a process. So I think, but that again is something that we just do from sport to sport to sport. So it's not necessarily special or unique to wrestling. It's just part of our process. So that's been something that's maybe a little different in the world of wrestling, but I think it's good, you know, for especially if you're somebody who wants to have feedback or, you know what I mean, that type of stuff. It's just like everybody's in the mix, everybody's in consideration, and kind of going from there. But at the end of the day, we still have to make decisions, and we're, you know, there's absolutely going to be crossover, and, you know, people at boys state and people at girls state and all that kind of stuff, because there's just, you know, there's some really, really great officials out there, and we want our girls to be able to have the best of the best too. But
I like that.
Yeah, but again, it's a whole other like task, right? It's a big chunk. So will we get it right year one? You know, whatever. I don't know. But I do feel confident in the people who are doing that, and they feel passionate about the process. They see value to it. So just another thing of like, we'll see how that works. Because I said, you know, it's like
figure it out.
Either they figure it out, or it's coming to me, and I'm like, okay, who's sending me chocolates and who's, you know, no, not really, but you know, it's one of those things of like, if it's up to me, what a mess, right? But again, at the end of the day, if it's what's got to get done for us to have a tournament, then it's going to get done. So,
well, I'm looking forward to what you guys got planned for the convention. If you want to come to the convention and get a laugh out of me, that's for sure.
Get there. Yes.
Last time I was talking in front of this amount of people, I cried the whole time. So hopefully that doesn't happen. I'm going to just try to make, hopefully it'll be really easy. I'll just look down the whole time.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that'll be interesting.
We'll just put like a microphone. We'll have this kind of set up, and you won't be able to see everybody.
Yeah.
You know, you'd be talking to a wall or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just gonna put me in a podcast format. Okay.
Yeah, it'll be fine.
All right. So I appreciate you coming on the show. We've been talking for a while, and I appreciate the insight on the season. I'm sure there'll be way more stuff coming up. I always get more questions after the convention because I get to talk to coaches and hear their concerns and the hurdles that some of them may have. It sounds like a lot of them have gotten over some of those initial, like, how are we going to pay for it? Okay, well, what happens, that conversation, what was really good about what Charlotte Bailey says, well, what if you had 15 more boys come out? That was a really, that was a stellar point really good point.
I've referred back to her in that several times, right? Of what do you do when you have a big class size,
correct,
you know, coming up in football, and you have to add, you know, 10 or 15, you find a way for them. Like you already have that process in place. So I thought that was a fantastic,
it's a good way to look at it. Yeah. You guys got a pink mat?
Oh my gosh. We have so many fun things that are going to be coming up. I can't like reveal all of it, but yeah, we have.
I mean, you've obviously been a night of conflict. So like, I'm a big, like, branding guy, and you guys do that really well. So
we're that's one thing that will not be lacking between what we normally do at our state tournaments and what Extreme Arena, like, they're very particular about those things too, right? So even if we didn't do that, they would, right?
Mm-hmm.
But so the combination of what we're doing and what they're offering too, I mean, it's gonna be totally insane.
I'm envisioning black mats with pink circles inside, but you know, that's a lot of money. That's 8 mats times, that's a lot of money. So that's what I want to see.
It's a good thing we're writing checks, right?
There we go. Yeah. There we go. Okay. All right. Well, we'll leave the conversation with that. If you missed any of the episode, go back. It's free to watch on Facebook or Rockfin. Erin, I really appreciate you and, you know, I guess your bosses for letting you come over here and spend time with us. So we'll see you at the convention.
Yeah. Thanks so much.
Anything else as far as resources go that maybe people are watching where they can get in touch with you or the union about, you know, questions they may have?
Yeah, no, I think, you know, my information's on our IGHSAU.org is our website. And so, you know, we've got some resources out there for coaches and our administrators and all that kind of stuff too. So if I, you know, just understand, like, if I'm not getting back to you right away, we got a lot of stuff going on right now. This is for sure the craziest time, but it's all good, right? It's good stress. It's good crazy. So we're really excited about that. But, you know, IWCOA, again, they've really beefed up what they're doing in support of this. You know, they understand the infrastructure that has to go to, you know, be able to support both sides and wrestling as a whole. So they've done a really great job as well in doing that as part of their process. But, you know, I am very thankful for all you do to promote girls wrestling, right? And the sport of wrestling, obviously, but that was something that existed before me, right? Yeah. And you know, there's been a lot of, you know, you mentioned Charlotte Bailey, and she's been fantastic in her efforts, and there, I mean, just so many people around the state, whether that's AAU, USA, whatever that is. There's so many people who have been pushing for this. Great coaches and officials who have long wanted this to happen, right? And so I'm really thankful that I've gotten the baton now, and that we can now partner with everybody and do this and really showcase it and give our girls a great experience. But thank you and your staff for what you guys do and you continue to do to cover and give great stories and really promote the heck out of the sport.
I appreciate it. We try our best. So,
but it's easy.
You can't do it without.
It's easy when all these kids are having fun too.
It's easy when we have athletes, right?
Yes.
So that's where we're at now.
Absolutely.
Is you know, should we start ranking different classes on our own, even though there isn't classes?
I mean, you know, whatever.
We thought about doing that. We thought about doing that, but we didn't want to. We'll see what happens. I don't want to get more put on Lars' plate, but yeah. So thank you everyone for tuning into the show. Make sure you get to the IWCOA convention. I know preseason nationals is going on, but you know, pop in over there if you can. If you can't make it to the event, at least, you know, get your membership in, and you know, those dues just don't go out poof into the sky.
Right.
They do go towards the awards that mean a lot to the coaches, that when they're done, you know, we're supporting that, the future history of, you know, of our sport. So thank you for everyone watching. We will be back next week. We'll have, we've got a lot of stuff coming up with preseason, coming up nationals, and then, you know, rankings coming out. So we'll have lots of conversation next week. If you've got any questions, any tips, anything like that, if you got any tournaments that you want us to be at this year, maybe some duels, we are going to try to get to a lot more duels during the week this year. So we're looking forward to that. Until next time, thanks for watching.